Welcome back to Divulgence, everybody. We have Adam from the Truth Desk in the house. What's going on, Adam? How are you today, my friend?
Not much, Jordan. Doing good. Glad to be here.
Right on, my friend. Well, it's always good to have you. You have just dropped a new documentary on false flags,
hmm
which I saw it, and it was really well done, really well researched,
Thank you.
very well narrated. Um, Great main character figure. uh, why don't you tell us a little bit about that, and let's because I'd love to talk about that today.
Sure. So false flags are they're a tactic used by governments in warfare to when one government wants to attack another country. They orchestrate an event that makes it look like they're being attacked and gives them a pretext to justify that war that they want. An example of that, a lot of people, I would put myself in this camp, think that 9/11 was a false flag to get some wars that the Bush administration wanted. But I mean, there's several examples of outright false flags or just deception that have been used to start pretty much every war that the US has been involved in for the past 130 years. And I even thought about going further to like the Civil War and like the attack on Fort Sumter. But I just,
Well,
at the end of the day, that's a lot of research. So I just did 130 years and went through every war: Spanish American, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, First Gulf, and then obviously 9/11. And I mean, I really, it's a 50-minute documentary, and I really feel that if people knew this information that's in it, our ideas about government and power would be very different. So I'm just gonna play the trailer here. That's all right.
yeah, man, absolutely. I think people definitely need to see it. So
Uh,
yeah, let's roll the trailer at the very least for sure.
okay. I am going to let's see here.
Pop her up on the share screen. That's probably your best bet.
So we're just gonna play the first minute and a half. I told you that all wars are started by lies, either by outright.
Sorry, I'll restart that.
What if I told you that all wars are started by lies, either by outright deception
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction.
or staged mass casualty events known as false flags? Public opinion is manipulated into believing the best course of action is to send our military halfway around the world to murder people we have no connection to.
You have to wash their brains and tell them there is a higher cause out there. It's religious, ethnic, racial, whatever. And for that higher cause, you can disregard all the normal rules of morality.
Wait. This all sounds like some sort of crackpot conspiracy theory. The United States government would never murder its own citizens to justify a war. We're the good guys, right? Today, we're going to uncover how generations of Americans have been lied to, have had their thoughts manipulated into hating others.
We need to send some cruise missiles over there right now and just start bombing the hell out of them.
Today,
All to line the pockets of big business and weapons manufacturers. I warn you, once you're awake, once you know the truth, you can never go back to sleep.
The military-industrial complex.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy.
Pretty proud of that trailer. So
Nice, man. Yeah, good job.
yeah.
It's a great doc, man. It really is. I mean, I was just telling you this before the show, but I think you did a great job. Everything's well researched and well presented, and you build it up and knock it down in a very well thought out way. So props to you
I
again.
appreciate that. Yeah, I started it. So after that, it gets into the Operation Northwoods, which was a proposed U.S. false flag in 1962. It was approved by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That would be the head of the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines. Basically, the top brass, the top military commanders in the U.S. approved this plan. JFK rejected it. And of course, this was after the CIA's failed Bay of Pigs invasion. That created a lot of dissent between JFK and the CIA. JFK would go on to fire the head of the CIA, the deputy director of the CIA. He fired the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff over Operation Northwoods, which side thing here, it's hilarious to me when people say that Israel killed JFK, because it's like, just, I'm sure they weren't happy with him, but there was a lot of people in America that weren't.
Yeah.
But
because that was Alan Dulles, right? That he fired.
Yes, the Alan Dulles was the head of the CIA, the longest serving member, the longest serving head of the CIA. But Operation Northwoods, the first time I read these documents, I was like, it almost made me fall out of my chair. It was, they were planning on staging fake military attacks against the U.S. base in Guantanamo Bay. They were going to shoot mortars at it. They were going to blow up boats of Cuban refugees. And this was all to blame on Fidel Castro and the newly communist government to justify a war. They were going to paint U.S. military planes to look like Russian MiGs and Cuban jets, and they were going to harass U.S. civilian aircraft. They planned to shoot down a civilian airliner, a chartered plane. They planned to drop incendiary bombs on Nicaraguan cane fields. I mean, this plan, and all of these were suggestions that they could do. Another suggestion was they could explode plastic bombs in American cities, start riots. I mean, the document is incredibly damning. And so for people that think, just as 9/11, for an example, I feel like the main resistance people have to this is, that's crazy, the government would never do something like that. When in fact, yes, they would. That's the main takeaway that we can get from Operation Northwoods. In fact, and this is not a uniquely American thing. Most people think that the Germans started World War II, right? The event that started World War II was the German invasion of Poland. People think that Hitler just attacked Poland because he's a jerk. Well, Hitler conducted an extensive false flag campaign against the Polish. He dressed up 7 or 9 concentration camp prisoners in Polish military uniforms. He took them to the Polish military border, the Polish-German border, shot them, and then said, "Look, the Poles are attacking us." He had fake radio communications from Poland, and this was like a months-long thing where he had been orchestrating this fake Polish aggression against Germany. And if you read the speech where he invaded Poland, it's like, for months I have asked for peace, and Poland has denied it, and we're now going to respond with the same aggression that we have been faced with for months. And I mean, if you read the speech, if you were an ordinary German at the time, you'd be like, yeah, let's attack Poland, just like the United States was at the start of the Iraq invasion and the Afghanistan war. Same thing with Imperial Japan. There was an incident called the Mukden incident, where the Imperial Japanese made it look like the Chinese were blowing up their rail lines. And so false flags are not, they're a common tactic used. If more people understood that, I feel like a lot of people have a happy-go-lucky perception of government and power, right? Our government would never do that. It's like, they would, and they have, and they have for probably centuries. We just have more modern examples, but people even point back to ancient Rome and the Great Fire of Rome, and Emperor Nero playing his violin as Rome burned because he wanted to redo the city. And so so these kinds of things have been going on for a really long time.
For sure, man. And sometimes they kind of accomplish their goal, And sometimes, obviously, they leave such an everlasting imprint. Like I'd say 9/11 is maybe one of the biggest false flags of them all, because not only did it start the wars, but it kind of just laid a foundation for changes in law, changes in surveillance, changes in, the way you look at war, and the way the newer generations of the Middle East, the newer generations of Americans saw the Middle East. And I think it just kind of paved a way for a lot of stuff that's still happening today. I'd say you can kind of link it back, right? So these things have such impact on history, aside from the whitewashing and rewriting that it sometimes does. But it's unbelievable. So I don't know, where should we begin here? I know. Why don't you talk a little bit about the Banana Wars? That was a good one that was featured in your documentary.
Yeah, the Banana Wars. So that was really the start of American imperialism, and it coincided pretty well with industrialization. And now all of a sudden you had rich businessmen in America. The start of it was the Spanish-American War. The Spanish-American War was, and I get into this in the documentary, but the event that started it was the sinking of a ship called the USS Maine. And basically, at the Cubans were fighting a war of independence against the Spanish. So we sent down the USS Maine to protect American interests in Cuba during that war. The ship's down there for a few weeks, and eventually a big explosion blows the thing up, sinks it. Immediately, the American press blames Spain. And it just starts this, it's exactly the same thing that happens at the start of every war. But immediately the press starts to run wild with it. None of the facts of this are known. No investigation's been done, and people are just screaming for a war with Spain. So eventually we get it. Comes out later, like 100 years later, in the 1970s, they actually float the thing to the surface and they examine it. They find out that it was an internal fire that ignited an adjacent ammo pile. So could have been intentional sabotage, like a false flag, but could have been an accident too. But the U.S. gains Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and one other place. But this is really good for American business, specifically fruit companies and banana plantation owners, because now they can go into these new territories. They can set up farms, mines, banks, all kinds of stuff, and the American government protects them. So, and this is important for people to understand too. I mean, it's similar to what you see in Ukraine. Part of the reason that this war in Ukraine is going on is, for so long, Ukraine was a Soviet bloc country, and you couldn't have American investment come in. And, if you're a multinational conglomerate type company, there's not a lot of avenues for you to go in and make more money. So when a new territory opens up, that's a huge opportunity for them to expand. And so that's what these banana plantation owners do. And then the Spanish-American War after that, you've got, I don't know how many police actions after that, but countries like Nicaragua, Haiti, Honduras, the Dominican Republic, the U.S. sends Marines down there. They send troops down there to affect regime change or to influence what's going on. Officially, they're sold to the American public as preventing European influence or stabilizing lawless countries. Really, they're because of lobbying from fruit plantation owners and banana plantation owners, which is crazy to think that, wars and death are being fought over fucking bananas, right? But there's even in the document, there's a story, and this is a true thing. A guy named Samuel Zamuri, a banana plantation owner, he was upset at the president of Honduras because he was giving him trouble in his banana business. So he buys a decommissioned U.S. battleship, rearms it with cannons, hires mercenaries, and goes down and deposes the president of Honduras. Now, of course, this is in a time where the Hondurans probably had like maybe muskets or something, they hadn't industrialized yet. That's why this was possible, was you could just have an industrialized battleship with some industrialized soldiers that have modern cartridge rounds, and they can go down there and knock off some guys with black powder muskets. But I mean, that's an insane concept. Imagine if Elon Musk did that, or Bill Gates or something. I mean, that
yeah, the Smedley thing is wild. Yeah, that was a good part in your doc. It comes in pretty early, so it definitely starts off great. It's a great doc, man. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, you bring up Smedley Butler, and there's a great quote. There's multiple great quotes by him, but he wrote a book called "War is a Racket," and he was involved in all of these banana wars. He was a major general. He was actually a prominent industrialist in the U.S. Organized a coup in America. They were going to have basically they wanted to install Smedley Butler as a fascist dictator of the U.S. And Smedley Butler got cold feet and basically blew the whistle on this whole thing. Nobody was ever arrested. So, yeah, War is a Racket by Smedley Butler. So he's got a lot of great quotes, but eventually he his eyes kind of got opened and he realized that all of these wars that he fought, all of the death, all of the destruction was just so American capitalists could make a few extra dollars. And it really affected him. And so that's why he wrote that book. And that was in 1933. So, imagine what it's like today. I mean, this stuff doesn't go away. And in the documentary, we get into the military industrial complex. It's like these companies, Raytheon, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, these companies that make most of their profits off of war. They want more war. They want to lobby the government for more war. They view it as, just like if you were a automobile manufacturer and you were lobbying the government to create more roads, that they view it as akin to that. So it's really important for people to understand this, that a lot of war and a lot of conflict is fought because of this, because of capitalists who want more market cap, or military companies who want to market for their armaments.
Right. Yeah, man, for sure. Have you read War is a Racket by any chance?
I have not, no.
I think I'm going to, it's pretty cheap on Amazon, actually. I'm going to add it to cart. There we go.
There you go.
I'm going to check that out. So, because that sounds very interesting, actually. When I watched your documentary and I saw that segment and then the big quote that you had up there, I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And now that you speak on it a bit more, it's like, okay, I'm gonna have to check that out. So there you go. I'll let you know. I'll keep you updated on that.
Yeah, he's got several amazing quotes. I actually had an alternate ending for that documentary. I really, anytime on YouTube you put something at the end of your video that lets people know it's ending, they start clicking off. But basically my alternate ending was it went through every US president, Trump, Biden, Dick Cheney, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton. They were all draft dodgers, in case you didn't know.
Yeah, for sure, man. Big time.
So, and then there was a quote by Smedley Butler at the end of basically how many of these war millionaires have actually fought in these wars that they wanted. You know, how many of them have spent nights in the trenches and stuff like that. It was really cool, but I took it off because I'm like, man, every time I put something like this in, people just start fucking clicking off the video.
Fair enough, man.
Yeah.
Well, look at this here. We got a shout out to Philip Blair 20. It's a free YouTube audiobook, apparently.
Oh, wow.
War is a Racket. So there you go. think I might still buy it though. But there you go. Right on. All right, moving on. Why don't we talk a little bit about? I think it's interesting also the world wars. When you start getting into, well, obviously, the world wars are legitimate, right? So yeah, you want to maybe step us through that a little bit? I think that would be very interesting.
Sure. So I'm not up on like a lot of people, if you look at it, you look at the creation of the Federal Reserve, when was 1913?
Yeah.
And then 1917, you have or it was the Federal Reserve, and then the income tax was like a year later, and then you had the First World War, because you need a lot of tax to fight these wars. They're not cheap. And World War One's crazy for a lot of reasons. I mean, you had people that were trained on wooden battleships with sails that by the end of the war are commanding modern metal battleships. But at the onset of World War One, which the U.S. didn't get involved for like 2 or 3 years, the war was raging, and most people were isolationists in America. 80 to 90% were so-called America First, just like you have today. And one of the events that really galvanized people into wanting to get involved in this conflict was the sinking of a ship called the RMS Lusitania, which was a civilian cruise liner, kind of like the Titanic, a big steamship that was sunk in British waters. It killed 200 Americans, like 1,700 people. And, just like with the sinking of the USS Maine, there were slogans, remember the Lusitania. The press started reporting on German barbarianism. That was a big thing too with his propaganda. You started to, and propaganda was big in both world wars of actually, I mean, it's basically just straight up racist kind of stuff. They would portray like Japanese people as apes. They portrayed Germans as apes. And, there's a video of like this ape crushing a globe, and this ape holding an American woman. So, but what was not reported on with this was that the Lusitania was actually carrying almost 200 tons of munitions, 303 cartridges, artillery shells, all kinds of stuff for the war effort, which made it a valid military target under international law. It was a military target. And also it violated U.S. neutrality laws, because there was laws on the books that the U.S. had to be neutral during this conflict. And additionally, the German Empire had put ads out in American papers saying, hey, don't travel on British ships leaving American ports, because they knew that the British were using them to get arms into the country. And the Germans also announced unrestricted submarine warfare in the British waters. But all of this stuff was not reported on by the U.S. media. They just framed it as the Germans cowardly sunk a civilian cruise liner. And that's the story that most people got. The fact that they were carrying arms on the ship was outright censored in the British media. And the true manifest of the ship was buried for decades. I believe Winston Churchill was even part of that cover up. And in the U.S., obviously, we have freedom of the press, but it was heavily underreported and not talked about. So, and then World War II, the stories is even odder because, obviously we know about the attack on Pearl Harbor, which, side note, did you see Trump roast the prime minister of Japan? Where you didn't tell us about Pearl Harbor.
Oh man, I'm gonna see if I can pull that up for everyone.
Yeah, and then the Japanese prime minister sitting there, like her eyes get all big, and yeah, I mean, Trump, love him or hate him, he definitely says stuff that
so entertaining, man,
that other politicians don't.
He's so entertaining, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I often wonder if that's part of his deal. You know, if he's meant to be entertaining, you know, because some of the stuff that he
I
does is
think
almost like a WWE type circus, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Here we go. I found it.
I mean, they had Hulk Hogan at the Republican National Convention,
Right?
ripping his shirt off.
Yeah.
I watched it. I was like, what? Like,
Okay, here we go. Let's check it out.
We went in very hard, and we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay, why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Okay, right?
Oh no. Sorry, we're freezing up a bit here.
Yeah, he's asking me. Do you believe in surprise? I think much more so than us. And we had to surprise him, and we did. And because of that surprise, we knocked out the first 2 days. We probably knocked out 50% of what and much more than we anticipated doing. So if I go and tell everybody about it, there's no longer a surprise, right? Okay, one more for the Prime Minister.
Mr. President.
Are you good for the Prime Minister?
Yes,
Go ahead, for the Prime Minister.
thank you very much. Japan's TJ Press. Japan's
No, I think we're
biggest
past it
concern
now.
is China.
Okay. I don't know why they clipped it so long, but that is freaking hilarious. Let's pull that back one more
We went
time.
in very hard, and we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay, why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor?
look at her face.
Oh, man, that is so good. Like, I got to give Trump 100% on that. Like, the best part is, why didn't you tell us about Pearl Harbor?
Who knows about surprise better than Japan?
And she's like,
Yeah.
that's so good, man.
Yeah.
Oh,
But-
God.
But the
Where's the
thing
sound?
with Pearl Harbor,
Sorry, I was just going to say,
well,
she's talking. Okay, go ahead.
be good. The thing with Pearl Harbor is, we had played decades of war games in the U.S. showing that the Japanese, if they ever were to declare war on the U.S., the first thing they would do is take out Pearl Harbor. It's our only Navy base out there. It was a refueling depot. It was strategically very important. And a few, maybe 6 months or 9 months before Pearl Harbor, the U.S. cut off all oil to Japan. Japan was already fighting a war against the Chinese. And the Japanese have viewed this as an act of aggression. Japan got 95% of their oil from us. So they could either give up on the war or they could capture additional oil fields. And the only oil fields that were available for them to capture were in the Dutch East Indies or British Malaysia. And then they knew if they did that the U.S. would declare war on them. So they had to take out Pearl Harbor to strategically be able to maneuver in the Pacific. And we knew this. We knew this was going to happen. So it begs the question, why wasn't Pearl Harbor better defended? And then you've got the Japanese or the U.S. ambassador to Japan sent an intelligence report to FDR 6 months before the attack saying the Japanese are planning an attack on Pearl Harbor. He knew because he's the the U.S. ambassador to Japan. He picked up wind of this. And then the morning of the attack, there was a submarine, a U.S. battleship off the coast, spotted and sunk a Japanese submarine. Another ship spotted a Japanese periscope out in the waters. And the first wave of planes was actually picked up about 2 hours before it actually reached Pearl Harbor. And had all of these warnings been properly heeded, it would have given the U.S. Personnel at Pearl Harbor time to man their battle stations and go to general quarters, which is, the reason Pearl Harbor was so devastating is people were like asleep. They were on leave. It was like Sunday morning. They were on leave on the mainland. And the Japanese just came in and decimated them. And then there's the testimony given to Congress by Admiral Kimmel, who is the commander of the Pacific Fleet, which I included that in the documentary. But basically, he says if the Navy Department in Washington had told me how the negotiations were going with Japan, because I guess Japan delivered to Washington an ultimatum. Hey, either I don't know what the extent of the ultimatum was. Probably start selling us oil or else, basically. And Admiral Kimmel says, if I had known about all of this, if I had known about everything that the Navy Department and everyone knew in Washington, I would have pulled my ships out of the harbor and had them at general quarters. And he says, he basically is asking, why wasn't I told this? So that's an interesting, and also all 3 aircraft carriers of the Pacific Fleet were not present at Pearl Harbor. So, and that's awfully convenient because those aircraft carriers proved pretty pivotal later in the war that we hadn't had those destroyed. And Pearl Harbor, for those that don't know anything about World War II, that was like a galvanizing moment for the entire country. It would have been much more emotional than 9/11 because it wasn't a terrorist group. It was another country that did this, and the attack was more devastating. The loss of life was increased, and I mean it really affected the people that were alive at the time. And then you've got some weird stuff too, like after Pearl Harbor, the US adopts a Europe first policy. So we're attacked by the Japanese, Pearl Harbor, and then immediately Germany declares war on the United States, and FDR says, all right, we're going to focus on Europe first. Like, okay, Hitler declared war on us, sure, but there'd been no aggression or hostility or nothing. And the Japanese, now we look at World War II much more in a European lens. At the time, Japan was much more hated in the US than Germany was. Germans were like an afterthought. They were like, they never attacked us. So most people thought of that as just, they were Europe. Yeah, we're helping our allies. We're helping Britain and France. But most of the country, the population, were really more focused on Japan. So it's interesting that FDR adopted that Japan first policy.
Japan first or Europe first?
Oh, Europe first. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, all good. I wanted to make sure. Yeah, that is very interesting. Yeah, I didn't. There were a lot of things I learned from your doc. That was one of them. That was interesting. Yeah. Let's see. Why don't we get into Vietnam a little bit? I know you touch on the military-industrial complex as well. We can get into that. But yeah, why don't we keep knocking down some more of the wars?
Sure. So after World War II, before World War II, you would have civilian factories would switch their factories over to wartime production. So companies that made cars would switch to making planes and tanks for the war. After World War II, we had a bona fide armaments industry, companies whose only job it was to make weapons. And this is what Dwight D. Eisenhower warns about in his famous speech about, he says, in the councils of government, we must guard against unwarranted influence by the military industrial complex. And that's what he's talking about. He's saying, hey, these companies that own these weapons manufacturers, they're lobbying for more war. And Dwight D. Eisenhower, for those that don't know, he was the supreme commander of the Allied forces in Europe during World War II. So he's not a peace-loving hippie. He's someone that's really, there haven't been many 5-star generals. And he was also a 5-star general. There haven't been many in U.S. history. There's none currently alive. But so he gives that warning, and then what we can see start to happen. Well, obviously we see Korea happen. We had the North Korea attack South Korea. We got involved. We had that war. And then, you had 10 years later, they're planning Operation Northwoods. They're all sorts, and that's just Bay of Pigs. The CIA had lots of planned operations against the Cubans. We really didn't like that Fidel Castro had come to power. It's a country 90 miles away that had turned communist, but eventually they set their sights on North Vietnam. And this was another thing, we talked about Allen Dulles, being fired, the head of the CIA by JFK, the deputy director being fired, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Another thing Kennedy is doing is he's keeping America out of Vietnam. And he's receiving a lot of pressure to send more troops to Vietnam. We had some advisors there. Kennedy was allegedly appalled. I think like 75 military advisors had died in Vietnam. And Kennedy just flipped a nut about it. And so he's keeping us out of Vietnam, which is another strike against him. And after Kennedy's death, we get President LBJ, and only about a year, it's less than a year after LBJ comes in, do we have the Vietnam War start. And the incident that gets us involved in Vietnam is called the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Very briefly, basically a U.S. battleship picked up on radar what they thought was a North Vietnamese vessel. We start firing at it. The ship relays back to Washington that they were under attack. LBJ asked Congress to expand the war, which they agree. But it later comes out that there was no North Vietnamese vessel out there. And the ship, the USS Maddox, was just firing into the open ocean. Now, a few things. How often does that happen? How often do you hear about a battleship just mistake something on radar and start firing shells out into open water? I mean, that's just kind of ludicrous. Okay. But Vietnam, and this blew me away when I first heard it. Vietnam, the reason it was such a quagmire, the reason it just drug on, and it just seemed like it took forever, and is because that's how it was designed. It was designed to never be won. And the reason is we couldn't just come in and attack North Vietnam. I mean, we're the US, for God's sakes. Like, we could have blown them off within a couple weeks.
It makes no sense.
All the US would do is protect South Vietnam. So we had bases there. Our soldiers would go out on patrols in the jungle. They would patrol the border, and the Viet Cong, the North Vietnamese, would ambush them, and then they would go back to North Vietnam. And the US dropped, just more bombs were dropped in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia than all other engagements that the US has been involved in combined. I mean, that's a lot of firepower. I mean, just bombing jungle, dropping napalm on jungle and fields, and and it's not just, it's chemical companies too, these defoliants that were used, because they would spray defoliants over the trees so that you could see through the leaves. Agent Orange, lots of industries saw a huge surge in demand for their products because of this war. And it was actually found out in, I believe, the early 70s. The New York Times ran an expose where they published the Pentagon Papers.
Yes.
And these were a series of studies commissioned by Defense Secretary Robert McNamara for President LBJ, showing that the U.S. government knew the way the war was designed that we couldn't win it. And this whole time that the U.S. had been involved in Vietnam was like 10 years, 9 years or something. The whole time the government's saying, victory's close. We just, we can win this war, when they knew that it was impossible to win. as I said, the rules of engagement made it impossible for the U.S. to win the war. Additionally, the U.S. presence in Vietnam was a motivating factor for the Viet Cong. Vietnam had been under decades of colonial rule. Before the Americans were there, it was the French. And so the Vietnamese viewed America as just the latest colonial power trying to impose their will on them. And the government knew that just the fact that we were there was helping the government of North Vietnam. So,
yeah, the Pentagon Papers is a very interesting story. There's a really good movie on it, actually, with Dave Spader, I think it is. Yeah, I was on a podcast with Daniel Ellsberg. I think probably like at least 5 years ago now, give or take. Yeah, and then he died, unfortunately, a year and a half later or so. But shout out to him. He's definitely a bit of a hero, I'd say, because imagine
the guy that published the papers, you actually talked to him?
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That's awesome.
So yeah, he was I think I can't remember when, but yeah, I mean, I really wanted to do like I wanted to get him on my show, but yeah, unfortunately, I had to take a break with the show, and then he passed away, and but
he was just like an analyst, right? He was an analyst.
Yeah. So they'd send him there, to check on things, and he was pretty hands-on in his I don't know, call it research, but anyways.
Yeah, well, he took those the Pentagon Papers, he stole them, and then he like photocopied them, like him and his kids and his wife. They were like, I don't know, they did it at night, and it took them a while, but they photocopied all of these papers, and yeah, he was like the Edward Snowden of the time.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, it's a really interesting story, actually. Let me see here. I would recommend people check out. Oh yeah, it's called The Pentagon Papers. Is the movie 2003. Really good. I think James Spader. I don't know if I said David Spader. James Spader, Paul Giamatti, Alan Arkin. Yeah, it's great. It's such an interesting story. Those whistleblower stories are usually pretty interesting, and that is definitely one that does not disappoint.
There's so many. I say this because it'd be awesome if they made a movie about Edward Snowden, but of course, mainstream. Have they really?
Yeah, you've never seen the Joseph Gordon-Levitt one? No. Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, it's Hollywood, unfortunately. Yeah. But and they include a bunch of crap about his like relationship with the girlfriend. You got to have the love interest.
Yeah.
So they do all that stupid bullshit. But yeah, it's an alright movie. It's good for a one watch, I'd say.
What's crazy is and before, obviously we had 9/11 and the Patriot Act and, kind of laying the groundwork for all that surveillance. Before 1994, I think, if the government wanted to listen to your phone calls, they had to place a physical wiretap on your phone. Now imagine like there's like these New York City mobsters that they busted, like organized crime was a real big thing, like Italian crime families, like 70s, 80s. To bust these guys, they would dress up like they were the fucking cable man, knock on their door, and they would actually put physical bugs in their house or in the wires. After 1994, They made it accessible for the government to basically tap anyone's phone that they wanted to from the phone companies themselves. So, what's crazy with this stuff is it's like, was 1993 and before just so absolutely lawless and wild that we needed to? I mean, could you imagine going back to that kind of a world before everyone was walking around with a GPS device in their pocket and posting their entire life on the internet? And
Yeah, growing up as a kid, things seemed a lot simpler, and I feel like, could have been a lot simpler now and a lot more relaxed if. But I mean, that's technology, right? That's something you just can't stop. Now we're worrying about AI robots that. Oh,
well, I tell you, the limiting factor for mass surveillance for a long time has been the fact that you've had a human on the other side of the computer analyzing what people are saying. Now, you can't do that for everyone. So they would do things like, if you said certain buzzwords like, terrorist or bomb or whatever, they would listen to your phone call. Now with AI, they have the capability to capture and process all of your data, all of your text messages you send, all of your internet traffic, everything. They can process it. And really, in my opinion, what the outcome of this can be is, of course, surveillance, but also predicting the future a little bit, or at the very least, in the sense of predicting elections. So they can say, this is what public sentiment is like. This is how people are feeling. They could run simulations and say, if we introduce this outside stimulus, if we introduce this event, the assassination of Charlie Kirk or something along those lines, that some kind of event like that, what is that going to do to people's opinion? And they can kind of shape and herd our opinions like that. And that's what this whole documentary I made was really about, is just how public opinion and thoughts are just, we're basically herded like cattle. And the mainstream media is like the shepherd. What you hear on CNN and Fox, since it's mostly just propaganda. It's designed to make you feel a certain way. It's designed to make you feel like we need to attack Iran. It's designed to make you feel like Trump is a fascist or whatever. And that has certain outcomes for the people that are behind it. And if I really wish more people understood that. I really do.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, it's weird. Like, once you figure this stuff out, it becomes so obvious. And even before people figure it out, there's so many things that seem so obvious. And the average person, they kind of pick up on that. So it's odd that there's not more people that fully wake up and call people on it. They just stay asleep and let everything kind of slide, unfortunately.
Well, and just like we talked about with 9/11, a big problem with this kind of stuff is, like, the major block that's standing in a lot of people's minds is the fact that it sounds crazy. The fact that you say,
Right.
There's no way, like, it sounds, and it's also, a lot of people want to be blissfully ignorant. A lot of people don't want to know this stuff. They want to think that the world is, quote, happy-go-lucky, that the government has their best interest at heart, that when we get involved in a war, it's about weapons of mass destruction. It's about Al-Qaeda or whatever. Like, that's a much safer feeling to have than to think, oh, it's a cartel of weapons manufacturers and gangster capitalists that just, don't care about death and destruction and just want to make billions of dollars. Like, that sucks to think about. It's much nicer to be like, yeah, we got to kick those terrorist butts,
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Um, and like I said, that 9/11 framework of that mentality is just going on up until today. I'd say I'm sure there's still a lot of people that are still like that. So
Yeah. Well, and I should say 9/11, my opinion, it was a false flag. My opinion, the I have to say, just for we don't have any facts or anything. I don't want to get my channel in trouble, but man, and I didn't before making this documentary. I knew a little bit about 9/11. I watched there's a documentary that was put out by architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, and it's called Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out, something along those lines. And I remember watching that years ago, and so I knew that 9/11 was I'm like, okay, this was a false flag. But for doing this documentary, I really did a lot more research into it because I have the whole last 20 minutes. There's just a section on 9/11. And so I really had to research it and find out all this stuff. And it's like the more you dig into it and the more you dig into the story behind Building 7, you know, and I mean, Building 7, if you watch it fall down, it falls down completely into its own footprint with zero resistance. And they say the official cause is like one structural beam got pushed off of its column seat, like it moved 6 inches, and then the whole building just goes. And I say in my documentary that that's basically like a Looney Tunes cartoon where someone removes one nail and an entire building just collapses. I mean, buildings don't work that way. They're designed with structural redundancies so that doesn't happen.
right.
Even if that column, even if there was a flaw in the structure, the building should have like fallen over. It should have been partially intact. If you build something out of Legos and you knock it over, you can still see part of it there. And none of the towers that collapsed on 9/11, they just collapsed into a big pile of rubble.
Yeah.
And they say that there was 2 small fires in Building 7 that caused that column to come off of its seat. And of course, there's no fire has ever brought down a steel structured building, which the same thing can be said for the Twin Towers. First of all, an airplane is basically just like an aluminum tin can. It has no strength, yet it punched a hole in the steel, the exterior steel of the World Trade Center. I mean, like big, heavy I-beams. It punches a giant hole into it. And then they say that the fires from the jet fuel soften the steel enough to cause that collapse. Well, again, that's never happened before in human history. It hasn't happened since. And there's not a lot of fuel for those fires to begin with. Most of the fire, I mean, if you've ever lit anything on fire, like with gasoline, there's a big whoosh. And then after a couple minutes, most of the gasoline's gone. It's burned off in that initial fireball. And that's the same thing that would have happened on 9/11 with the planes. You would have had a big fireball, and then that would have ignited office fires. But there's not that much stuff in those buildings to burn. They're not made out of wood. The buildings themselves are made out of steel and concrete. And the only thing that's in there that's combustible is like the carpets, the drapes, the office furniture. I mean, there's not that much stuff in there to burn. And when you really think about it like that, and just if you've ever you burn a sleeper sofa. I burned sleeper sofas before, or anything that's got a metal frame. All the ordinary stuff burns away, and you have the metal frame still intact. So it's when you really dig into it, and this isn't just me saying this stuff. This architects and engineers, there's over 3,500 of them now. Architects with PhDs that have come out and said this makes no sense. All the science is pointing in one direction, and the government and its wing of propaganda points in the other direction. And it's just crazy that's. I mean, if you look it up, there's only like 20% of the American population that would agree with me that 9/11 was a false flag. And to me, that's really insane, because if you look at the evidence, specifically the physics. I mean, just let's stay away from all the, what ifs and who do you think did it and all this stuff, because that's where you tend to lose people in the weeds of these conspiracies. If you just look at the simple physics of how the towers came down, you can say this doesn't make sense. And I would encourage anyone to just start with Building 7, because that's the most glaringly obvious example of controlled demolition.
Right. Looking at the overhead views of the destruction, it's like, if you were to look at it and ask someone, like, what do you think happened here? You would, I feel like you would have to get like near 100% of the people saying, well, it looks like these different areas were all blown up by bombs. One bomb? No, not one bomb. So yeah, it's odd. It's odd. It's very odd. And there are, architectural groups that are dedicated to this, and like that's their specialty, right? And they don't have any. I don't think don't have any skin in the game, so to speak, other than wanting to know the truth. So, yeah, I don't know. I tend to lean on respecting their opinions, right?
Yeah,
So.
Absolutely. Again, I try to, with stuff like this, I try to just focus on the science and the physics, because when you start getting into, oh man, dude, I've been seeing it all over X lately, is like people talking about like directed energy weapons being used, and they're like, look, they dissolve the Twin Towers with a laser beam from space and all that stuff. It's like, okay, that stuff's cool, but you're gonna turn a lot of people off by saying that.
Yeah.
Like maybe there is something to it, but like let's just get over the hurdle of the government's official story is wrong. Like let's get over that first, and then we can look at the arguments of space lasers bringing the towers down.
Yeah.
And honest to God, I feel like some of this stuff is intentional disinformation. Hey, the government comes in, hey, let's plant some people and let's have them talk about Jewish space lasers taking out these towers. And then it'll just make everyone that has legitimate questions seem crazy. Oh, you question 9/11? Oh, you're one of those people that think lasers brought the towers down,
Right.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's interesting. It makes you wonder, like, how some people get their theories, if they truly believe in them. That is.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems odd.
We talked about this kind of stuff a little bit. But in my opinion, the moon landing is the moon landing conspiracy. I think we went to the moon. I'll just say that. I didn't used to, actually. I only came to this conclusion about a year, 6 months ago. I made a video about the moon landing, and I was going to make a moon landing hoax video until I actually started to research it. And in my opinion, the moon landing hoax conspiracy was probably started by the CIA to lump in with the JFK assassination hoax, because at the time, a lot of people believed we went to the moon. And a lot of people also believed that the CIA killed JFK. So it was like, okay, let's lump in this moon landing conspiracy with the JFK assassination, and then we'll make these people who think that the CIA, probably did kill JFK, we'll make them kind of seem like, we don't want to be associated with those moon landing people. I'll tell you why. We could, we're an hour into this. I can spoil it, but the reason that I think that the moon landing was real is because there was radio communication between a few things. First of all, something's definitely up on the moon. The Apollo sites have been photographed, not just by the US, but by other governments. So you have to expand this conspiracy now to like the Russians and the Chinese and the Japanese and the South Koreans. But let's just say that that we did send something up to the moon. It just wasn't manned. Okay, they've zoomed in on the photographs and they can see buggy tracks and they can see the footprints of the. So now you're talking about, because something's definitely up there. Something definitely went there because people tracked the rocket going up. People tracked the radio communications. Like they talked to mission control the whole time. Those communications weren't encrypted. So people like ham radio operators and the Soviets and people could pick this communication up. So now you're talking about, like, if you want to expand the conspiracy, you're saying, okay, we shot something to the moon. It had pre-recorded conversations and video footage on it that were being transmitted back to Earth. This thing landed on the moon and some sort of animatronic robot came out of it and collected samples and stuff. And that just becomes, to me, a little far-fetched, especially when at the time we did send biologics up to the moon. Well, the Soviets did in a mission called Zond 5. They sent fruit flies and tortoises and some seeds. Now, these things that they sent up were so-called
easy with the tortoise. To be nice. To be nice. Let's not turn this into a horror episode.
Yeah. Well, the Soviets did dissect them when they got back. So.
Okay, all right, moving on.
Do you like tortoises?
Hear about dog? Yeah, man, I love tortoises.
Yeah,
I have
they're
a tortoise.
Cool. Oh, you do?
Yeah,
That's cool.
Yeah, I have 2 turtles and a tortoise.
But
have you heard about I think the 2 Italian ham radio operators who think that they picked up Russian space experiments, launches, where they think they heard, astronauts or lunarnauts or whatever choking in space, cosmonauts. Thank you. Choking in space, possibly burning up in space, all sorts of a lot of crazy.
Yes,
stuff.
I know
it's freaky.
There's one where the creepiest one is they picked up an SOS signal that was being sent, that was moving. The signal was getting fainter and fainter, so it led them to believe that a Russian space probe was slowly floating out into the vastness of space, and it was sending an SOS signal back to. That would be one of the scariest fucking ways to die.
Yeah, man. Oof. All of them are like, the thought of all those are just ridiculous, man. Ridiculously scary.
There's one where you can hear this chick say "I am hot" over and over again. She's like, "I am hot, I am hot," and it's like because her ship was burning up in re-entry. Here, check this out, man. You'll probably have you ever seen the cosmonaut that fell from space?
I've heard of it, but I don't think I've seen it.
So this guy right here, that's a picture of him. Okay. This was a cosmonaut that legit fell from space. And he I think apparently he was no, cosmonaut. He was Russian.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry, they just look like American.
Yeah, no, these are Ruskies here. But yeah. Yeah, I don't know what the story was. If he fell out of his doing a spacewalk or something. There he is. Vladimir. What a way to go.
Yeah, you're walking in space and then all of a sudden you're falling through space, I guess. Bam, right into the earth. Damn. That's crazy. Why don't we before we start wrapping up, why don't we get into the Gulf War a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, first of all, the little bit of history, Iraq attacked Iran, likely at the behest of the Americans. Saddam Hussein was a U.S. ally in the 80s. And we obviously don't much like Iran in this country. So we had Saddam attack Iran, caused him some financial troubles, and then his southern neighbor Kuwait started siphoning off. They drilled sideways under the Iraq-Kuwait border and started to siphon off oil from Iraqi oil fields. Saddam discovered this. He brought it to the attention of the UN. They did nothing. Saddam summons the U.S. ambassador to Iraq, April Glaspie. And Ambassador Glaspie basically says, this is an Arab affair. We're not going to, the United States, it doesn't concern itself with what Arab countries do with each other. Saddam takes that to mean he can attack Kuwait, which, side note, the CIA likes to develop psychological profiles on other world leaders. And so Saddam invades Kuwait. And then you have, George Bush gets up and he says, this aggression will not stand. And, they bring in, the U.S. Congress brings in a hospital worker from Kuwait to testify in front of Congress about atrocities that she witnessed. Specifically, she's seen in tears, crying, saying Iraqi soldiers tore premature babies out of incubators and let them die on the cold floor. Afterwards, it came out that this woman was actually the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States, and she was coached by a PR team on how to give that speech. And then, of course, with the deception that was used to essentially trick Saddam into invading Kuwait, the whole thing was basically just a frame job. Of course, the president at the time, George H.W. Bush, former CIA director, in my opinion, the only real American presidents we've had in recent history would be JFK, Nixon, and maybe Jimmy Carter. LBJ, a lot of people think he was involved in Kennedy's assassination. Nixon, the story that we have that he was a crook was inaccurate. The majority of the people that did the Watergate break-in were CIA members. Nixon never ordered it. They essentially framed him. And then they got rid of his vice president, Spiro Agnew, for tax evasion or something. So we get Gerald Ford, the only unelected president in American history. Jimmy Carter, peace-loving guy, but he's viewed as spineless in this country. Then you have Ronald Reagan, who is a fucking actor that made propaganda films for the U.S. government, right? You have George H.W. Bush, former CIA director. Bill Clinton, one of the most compromised politicians in U.S. history, close friend of, he was just this no-name guy from Arkansas, So, yeah, in my opinion, those were the, Nixon, Carter, and JFK were the last real. Well, and just think about how scared every American president would be knowing that the CIA fucking blew JFK's head off, allegedly. I mean, that'd be scary,
Yeah,
because you're not going to get out of line, So
crazy. So yeah, sorry, keep going on the Gulf War. My bad.
Oh, well, so that was the first Gulf War. Like I said, just basically started by deception and stuff. Obviously we had 9/11 that we talked about a lot. The second Gulf War, Iraq, there was more private security and defense contractors in Iraq than U.S. military in 2007. We also had the U.S. came in when we invaded Iraq. We completely dismantled the Iraqi army. We completely dismantled the police force. I think we might have kept some of them on, but basically we came in and we fired a bunch of military-aged men with military tactical training. We fired them. We gave them no pension and created the conditions for the insurgency. Some would argue intentionally created the insurgency. This was counter to what we did in Japan and Germany. So a lot of those former Iraqi soldiers and police became the insurgents, who could have been, you never know, could have been funded through black budget programs by the CIA, just speculating on that. But you also had the morning of 9/11, there was a meeting of the Carlyle Group, which the Carlyle Group is they buy businesses and revamp them and sell them. But at the time, they were a consortium of like defense contractors and oil field service providers. There was a meeting of the Carlyle Group the morning of September 11th that included George H.W. Bush, the former president, and Osama bin Laden's brother as an honorary guest. So, and then of course you've got Dick Cheney, who was former CEO of Halliburton, who got no bid oil field service contracts to help rebuild Iraq. And you can look into those. I mean, there's some like they moved 80,000 gallons of propane at $27 million for the whole time. I mean, they just completely raped the government on all of these contracts that they had. And another thing too that Saddam had, and this is a common theme that you see. Fidel Castro did it. Iran did it. Well, when we ousted the Shah, Saddam Hussein did it. They will nationalize assets within their country. So nationalizing is where they come in and there's foreign companies operating mines and farms and oil fields. They basically just kick the foreign companies out. They say, get lost. This is a state-run organization now, and we're going to take all the profits from it, because it's much better to take all the profits than just tax these foreign companies at whatever percent. And this tends to piss off U.S. corporations. This tends to piss off. Same thing. Venezuela did it with Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez nationalized all the oil fields. That's why we've been doing so much cage rattling against Venezuela. I mean, I remember being a kid in the early 2000s, and they were cocksuckering Chavez on CNN. Trump finally came out and thumped him. Which that was an odd, who knew that the U.S. could just come in and kidnap a dictator, just the head of another country. We can just come in and arrest them, and that was pretty wild.
Crazy, man. It was a crazy way to start off the year, that's for sure.
Yeah. Now we got Iran going, and fucking Benjamin Netanyahu might not be alive anymore. And
yeah, have you heard anything yet on that? I still like all his recent videos are all, I think, confirmed to be AI and fake. So
I think so. I looked at them. They appear to be AI to me. Just
yeah,
through my own eyes.
I would agree, really. So we'll see. Unless, some of them are obvious, but it'll be interesting to see.
I asked Grok if they were AI. Of course, Grok said no. I asked uncensored AI.
Yeah,
Uncensored AI said yes. And
Grok's being an asshole about it, so I don't know.
So yeah, I don't know. But the one where his ring disappears, that's real. And they're like, oh, it's just how the lighting is and stuff. It's like, man, his ring straight up disappeared. That was, I don't know, seems odd. But
I don't like it, man. I don't like it at all.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, world leaders have body doubles. The CIA has had lifelike masks that they can use for decades now, where you can't, you could put a mask on and get some makeup done, and people couldn't tell that you were wearing a mask. So it's not super hard. Now, faking someone's voice is a lot harder, but that could be done much easier with AI. So I don't know. It's hard to. I know it sounds cliche these days, but it's hard to know what's real. Honestly, it's hard to know what you're. And eventually AI is going to be so good that it's going to be able to fool the detectors. And then what are you going to do? You're going to have some sort of proof of chain, proof of custody thing, where I've even heard people talk about incorporating blockchain technology into, like, if you make a video, somehow it gets registered on a blockchain as authentic right away. So I don't know, but it's going to lead to some pretty weird questions, and it's not going to be that long before you see a video and you think, is that real? I see videos all the time that I know are AI, that you can see people commenting on it like, wow, oh my gosh,
Makes you want to just shake them, right? Like, come on, the fuck, dude, crazy.
Yeah, old people really struggle with it.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Unfortunately, yeah. And to kind of cap things off, I'd say the whole false flag topic is an interesting story, going back into Iran, going back into the Middle East, because the reason for this war, at least from the American perspective, is still up in the air, I'd say. It's supposed to be Israel's war. The reasons that are being given from Trump and his administration, people seem to differ and change. So it'll be interesting to see if they can, kind of lock down on a reason why 16 plus Americans have died and are going to be put in danger, and have been put in danger for the last 21 days. So,
yeah. Well, we've been at odds with Iran for a really long time. They're counterproductive to our interests in the Middle East, and by extension Israel's interests. They fund terrorist groups. They're not make nice. A lot of they're not nice. And I think Trump's just someone that's, like you showed with the clip of him and the Japanese prime minister, he just doesn't give a fuck.
No.
And if he thinks, he's like, I'm bigger than you, I'm stronger than you, I'm going to fucking hit you. And what are you going to do about it?
You're not going to hit me back.
They don't have sovereignty over their own airspace. Imagine that. Like the US and the Israelis can fly missions over Iranian airspace. They have no air defense. We wiped out their air defense capabilities. Their air force is like, it's like Russian MiGs and F-16s from the 70s. They're not a very powerful country, and they cause a lot of problems. I just, wars are expensive, and like, if we're going to fight one, where's the money coming from? we're $38 trillion in debt, which people have been talking about the national debt for a very long time. The GDP of America is $20 trillion, and the government doesn't have access to the entire GDP. They get 20% of it. So let's see what yearly tax revenue is. Basically, we're going to go bankrupt. The interest on the national debt was more than the Defense Department budget this last year. So that's very unsustainable. We're still running a deficit in this country. Eventually those chickens are going to come to roost. So, we need to balance the budget. And if we're going to get involved in something like this, I'd like to see some spoils of war for the US. I'd like to see some, let's get some gold, man. Let's get something like,
yeah. And I'm hearing that, the 39 trillion in debt is more like some people are saying it could be as high as like 100 trillion. When all said and done.
Yeah. Who knows? So tax revenue for the federal government fiscal year 2025 was 5.2 trillion. So that is 7.5 times higher. That's if you make, okay, let's say you make $60,000 a year. That would be like if you owed $450,000 and you're not paying any of it off. You're only paying interest. That's just to give people a personal finance kind of, Warren Buffett used to say, hey, you got to look at debt in relation to GDP. It's like, okay, well, we're well past that now. We're just spending and spending and spending. And, if the rest of the world gets off the petrodollar, because right now gas and oil and gold is traded in dollars, and it creates this artificial market for dollars. If the world tries to get off that system, some people think that that's part of the deal with the Iran war, was that the Iranians were looking to trade oil in currencies that are not US dollars. Same with Venezuela. And so maybe Trump understands, the economics behind it. And he's like, oh, wow, we run a really shitty budget here. And if other countries stop needing US dollars, it's going to tank our economy. So rather than fix our economy here, we're just going to go blow some shit up.
Right.
Because that's the American way.
Yeah. Piss people off,
Yeah.
And it's not good, because certain countries are in the position, I think, like China, if they pull out all their investments, they can, it goes back to the 2008 crash. When I think, Henry Paulson met with China, and he made a joke saying, you're at a point right now where if we pull out all our interests, you guys will literally collapse. But don't worry, we're not going to do that. Scary thought, man. You're pissing off the world. And China is, I'd say, obviously not on the ally side of things. It's scary. Like if the wrong leader gets in charge, the wrong administration gets in charge, like I think maybe has happened now in the States, things have gotten out of control. If that started happening other places in the world, never mind, man. I think we'd have a world-ending war.
Well,
and that. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say maybe we're seeing the start of that with Iran.
Yeah, and that brings me to my final question for you. Is it World War III yet? And if not, at what point does it become World War III? I think we're at plus 20 countries involved in some way, and many countries have been attacked, has seen destruction. China and Russia are big players that aren't directly involved. But, for example, Russia is definitely indirectly involved, helping out Iran with targets and whatnot, supplying ammunition, and not that it's to do with the war, but to do with another war that Trump might start, or another takeover Trump might start. Cuba, China's helping Cuba out. And Russia's also helping Cuba out with Russian oil, which Trump recently said that they can't buy. So, all sorts of shit there. So if they get involved, I'd say my thought is if Russia or China definitely gets directly involved, it's definitely a World War III. But what are your thoughts?
I think World War III won't start until Trump annexes Canada. For those that don't know, Jordon is Canadian. Do you hear? Huh?
I said, buddy, let's calm it down a bit.
Oh.
I'm joking. I'm joking, man.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. I thought maybe I insulted you. No, we got to get Greenland.
No. Go fuck yourself, buddy. It's all good.
Yeah, we got to get Greenland and Canada. No, I think if China gets involved, that's going to be really scary. Britain and France and most of the Western European countries go along with the U.S. Russia, I think it could. They're not really a threat like they were in the 50s and 60s. 70s and 80s, the Soviet economy tanked. I mean, just look at how ineffective they are in Ukraine. Their soldiers
too. Yeah.
Their soldiers went 100 miles into Ukraine at the start of this war, and they ran out of gas because there's so much corruption in the Russian army. They started selling the gas on the black market. Same thing with the extra ammo, the grenades and the bombs and stuff that they had. So Russia sent all those troops down to the border. They said they were doing war games. The Russian officers, as is tradition in Russia, sold off all of the extra armaments that they had. And I mean, that just shows you could see some of the transport vehicles had tires on it that said CCCP on them, which that's what the USSR was known as in Russia. So you're talking about tires that are 30 years old. Tires will dry rot, even if they just in a factory under enclosed conditions, they don't last but 10 years. So Russia is incredibly ineffective. I think they're technologically behind. I mean, Ukraine is holding them off, granted with the most modern technology from Western countries, but I don't think Russia is as scary as our leaders make it out to be. I think China, if they were to get involved, that's where things could get really dicey. Of course, Russia does have nukes, but if China gets involved, that's where I would say, whoa. Now, China, very interestingly, has a non-interventionalist foreign policy. It's basically the exact opposite foreign policy that the U.S. has. China does not go out and engage in regime change. They don't engage in coups. They don't do this kind of bully foreign policy that the U.S. has. They go out and they make friends through partnerships. Like, a lot's been said about the roads and bridges project that they give money to countries to build airports, to build infrastructure, and then they want partnership from these countries for that. So China is while they're not, you'd probably rather live in America than you would China, but at least from my point of view, they probably have a more ethical foreign policy than the U.S. does. So it's going to take a lot for China to get involved, but if they do ever get involved and they directly oppose the U.S., I think that's where we'll see some real sparks start to fly. And nuclear weapons are, they're almost an 80-year-old technology now. There's things that the government could have that would make nuclear weapons look like almost nothing. I'm just guessing, like black budget kind of things. And I mean, or just even straight up nuclear weapons. Human warfare is 200,000 years old, and nuclear weapons are 80 years old. I mean, eventually something could happen where we, get into a scary situation. And these people that like to play these war games, that like to make a few $1 million off of this conflict and sell some arms here. It's like Trump said it best to the Zelensky at the start of his presidency. You're gambling with World War III. And people say, well, it's a childlike view of the world to say that we can't have war or whatever. It's like, okay, well then I guess we'll just fucking blow each other up then, because again, eventually the technology is going to be there to where it's not hard to make these things. Eventually, if you could theoretically, let's say 3D print a nuclear bomb, if you could assemble it atom by atom, and I know this stuff sounds like kooky sci-fi now, but 3D printers sounded like kooky sci-fi 100 years ago. What are we going to have in 1,000 years or 5,000 years? Maybe eventually it wouldn't be that far-fetched for, people with a little bit of money to acquire something where they could legitimately do something similar to a 3D print of a nuclear bomb. Like it's going to lead to some weird questions of, how much longer can humanity even survive? There's a theory out there about why we haven't contacted aliens yet that says once aliens get to a certain point in their civilization to be able to contact other civilizations, they destroy themselves. And that the universe is full of these little civilizations that come into existence, then poof, they're gone. And I really hope that's not the story of us, but
yeah, man,
the possibility's there.
Yeah. Fair enough, man. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Adam from the Truth Desk. Can you, and I just want to add again, great job on the new documentary. I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed this discussion about it and about your work on the false flags. Manufactured terror. All wars are started by lies. False Flags. So yeah, I hope you guys definitely check it out. Can you let everyone know where they can find you, my friend, please?
Yeah, youtube.com/@thetruthdesk. This video right here that's playing, the one we've been talking about, is my pinned video, so it'll start auto playing for you if you visit my channel. And leave a like on it. I took research and editing, probably 100 hours went into it. So
I meant to do that. My bad. There you go. Boom.
gotcha. You did.
I wanted to leave a comment, so that's probably why I just haven't left a comment yet. I was going to do it at the same time, so I'll get to it, though.
All good, man. I appreciate you having me on again, Jordon. It's always great to talk to you.
Yeah, man, for sure. You enjoy the rest of your day, and yeah, we'll definitely be in touch and have you on again soon. Okay.
Right on, bud.
Okay. Take care, my friend. All right, everyone. There's Adam from the Truth Desk. I highly recommend you check out his new documentary. I give it 5 thumbs up personally, or 10 thumbs up, I guess I would say. Yeah, so make sure to check that out. Also, please subscribe to the Divulgence Podcast on YouTube, Rumble. I've actually just finally been monetized on YouTube, so you guys can leave a super chat if you so wish. I'm still trying to figure that stuff out right now. And please, you can get audio versions on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure to check out the episode descriptions, because you can check out any discounts I may have from affiliations like Ollie Demigard, and of course the Scott Horton Academy. Please check that out. Go to scotthortonacademy.com/divulgence to check out his amazing new project. And yeah, I think that's it for now, guys. I'm off tomorrow because it's my birthday. And then we're back on the 23rd with Austin Wayne Picard and Chris Angle. And then, yeah, we got 8 p.m. on Wednesday and some more stuff to close March out. So that'll be great. But yeah, for now, take care and be well, guys.